Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Sam Eckert, Exhibition Manager. These exhibitions on view through November 11th represent our finale in the 2023 exhibition series. Our next show from November 24th through the end of the year, AVA will present the AVA Members Holiday Exhibition, which typically includes about 100 artists. It will be featured in all 5 named galleries, and we will host an open house on Saturday, December 2nd from 11 to 4, followed by a holiday artist reception from 5 to 7. So tonight we're focusing on these 3 artists. Please welcome Cheryl Betz, Rachel Gross, and Mary Mead. Oh, there's Cheryl. So Cheryl, Rachel, and Mary each consider materiality and subject with thoughtful intention, curiosity, and skill. They toggle between disciplines and work in a variety of mediums and materials. To begin our chat tonight, I'd like to ask each of you to please share how you came to be an artist, maker, and what drives you to make art. So anybody can start.
Cheryl start. During the first chat.
True.
Speak in the microphone though, so we can hear.
No, you don't need to.
Okay.
Okay.
It'll pick you up. It's very sensitive.
All right. I just like to make things, and as long as I can remember, I made things. And I went to a high school that had a really great art curriculum, and I took everything that they offered, but never thought I could really do that as a profession. So when I went to college, I was encouraged by teachers to go into law, and that's what my intention was to be a women's advocate. But then when I got there, the classes that really interested me were philosophy, studio arts, and art history. So that's how I got here.
I didn't take art in high school, and I went to college a couple of times and quit, dropped out, and the second time I dropped out, it was because I was not going to class, I was drawing. And how that happened, I don't really know. I just started drawing, and I wrote recently that Lily Mayer I babysat for Lily. And I noted when I went to their house, the art, furniture, and I was probably 15, 14, and the architecture, so I had this thinking already in my mind, and or as an interest. And I was fascinated by Lily, and my parents also had a friend in New York City when we lived in New York, Jean Leroux, who was a French painter. And he was one of their most interesting friends, I thought. And of course, I went to the school right next to Guggenheim, and there was the Met and the Jewish Museum. We were always going and traveling and going to museums. So I think it was all kind of simmering in there. And then with Lily's encouragement, I showed her some work at my 21st birthday party that my parents, I would have been a debutante in New York City, but so they kind of had a costume party for me called Last Night on Board Ship, and everybody wore costumes. And I said, Lily, can you come see, look at some stuff? She said, why don't you come to my critique group? And Adrian Duckworth was there, and Charlotte, and Bill Peabody, I think. There was a whole bunch of Tom Woodbury. And I just kind of started drawing, and then I went to Wisconsin as a painter in Madison, and then I did sculpture, and then I went to Tufts, Boston Museum School for my MFA. I don't know, it was sort of an organic process with unconscious development, I guess.
So I guess I always drew and loved to do art as a child. I remember my friends and I would draw people and come up with stories about them, and it was I just love that idea, we could just kind of create these worlds and these stories with our drawing. And I guess, and I had a facility for it and loved doing it, so then got a lot of encouragement. I also had a high school teacher who was really amazing. And so I learned a lot of, doing representational drawing and painting through her. I majored in art and religion at college. I took at college, my freshman year, my first printmaking class, and loved that. But, also painting was kind of my love as well. But I ended up doing printmaking in grad school at Tyler School of Art in Philadelphia. And, kind of always did both printmaking and then other, sort of large-scale drawings and paintings as well. So,
What do you think drives you? Like for me, like I want to see something made, so I'm like curious about like how I'm going to make something, and I want to see the end result. Like that's what drives me. Like I don't know.
yeah, me too.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't know
You
if
put it
that's
really
universal.
well, thanks,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like a questioning. Like,
Yeah.
if I did this, or I could do that, or maybe I could make it better by doing this. And I think for me too, it's a questioning of like more of a philosophical questioning as well as hands-on questioning. But, yeah, and seeing other art. That
Yeah.
really, you have
Getting
to
inspired.
go and see it in person. And
Yeah, I'm constantly doing screenshots on
Yeah.
Instagram. I have a little file.
Right, and having that like reaction, like seeing certain work and feeling so moved by it, and it's nice to feel like you can have that dialogue with people looking at your own work or looking at other people's.
Yeah. Great.
It's funny, I'm not sure what my answer is, but I was looking at one of the first prints I did of this silhouette series, and I take this plant matter and I put it on a overhead projector and project it onto a piece of wood, and then I'm drawing that and figuring it out. And I have to be honest, I can't remember the moment that I did that. I only did it 2 years ago, but I don't know what. I used to, when I was teaching drawing to students, I would put stuff on that overhead projector and tell them to draw what they saw. So I had done that, but I hadn't applied it to myself. I don't know. These things just occur. That's the way I feel like my life is. Something happens and I react to it. But I love making things.
Yeah.
I love sculpture. I love
Do you make
making
notes?
prints.
Do you make notes? Like if something hits you, you're like,
Yeah.
all that. There's no.
and collect.
I can't keep a journal going more than 2 pages.
Yeah.
I have about 25. I'm so undisciplined in that regard.
All right. Well, so let's see here. So Cheryl, let's see. So we have Cheryl Betz here. So Cheryl, I think of you as a storyteller in the way you weave a historical archive into a reimagined contemporary narrative. I love how we agreed to arrange these pieces. It evokes a memory of a wall of photographs in my grandmother's house. Can you talk about your photograph collection, how long you've been collecting, and why do you think you are? What do you think these strangers represent or mean to you?
I've been amassing photographs for a long time. I don't even know, years and years. I think these older photographs, I'm so drawn by the fact that they're very small, and when you see them, you have to kind of hold them in your hands, and there's this intimacy that you have with them. And I usually find my photos in resale shops where there's photo albums from families, and it's really sad because you think of when people would say if there was one thing you would run back to a burning building for, what would it be? And people would say, they're photo albums, and here they are, just, so I buy them because, I just kind of want to bring them home and take care of them. But I only recently started using them in my work, and I think that for like I think the people represent more just this common humanness that we all share. And I like the fact that their signifieds are gone, they're out of context, so you don't really know their history. And I just find that very, very interesting.
So are you responding to the photographs as you develop a piece, or can you talk about your process a little bit, because it's so layered?
Yeah, well, for the short story pieces, I usually go through the photos until something clicks, and sometimes, like with these, I combine different photos. Those start with the photos, and then I paint over them to change the narrative. And what I do is I have the photographs, but I reshoot them with my iPhone in my studio, and I let shadows fall in and ambient light, because I feel like that way I have a history with it. So I do that, and with the short stories, it starts with the photographs. With the other pieces, those start with a concept, and then the photographs come in later. So, yeah, these are more about the images and reacting to them.
I'm tripping on a photo album that Steve got at a dump every time I go up the stairs, and I'm so delighted that these strangers have found a new home.
Yeah.
I was just saying, like, the perfect spot. I'm not.
Did you give them?
I haven't yet, but
Oh,
he
yeah.
brought it home,
More.
and none of us have had the heart to say,
I know, that's the thing, you know.
who are
it's
these people?
like, yeah, but, you know,
They're not my people.
right.
Yeah, I know.
Don't tell them that.
So we have Rachel. So Rachel, it's interesting the way you play around with manipulating dimensions and perspective in your compositions, and that you use geometry in your work. Is there a deeper meaning behind your fascination with tilting planes?
Well, it's funny you say geometry, I mean, because I'm thinking like, I mean, I guess they're geometric in that they're straight edges, there's angles, but I'm not really using math to figure anything out. I guess for me, there was a period where I did I was like interested in more representational work, and I would do a lot of sort of drawings and prints of interiors, and I just love the idea, like you could draw a single line and two radiating lines coming from it, and suddenly you have a corner of a room. Like I guess the tilted plane, it's just kind of, I wish there was something deeper than just like the illusion of space. I'm just so fascinated by like the idea that you can tilt a rectangle and draw it tilted, and suddenly you have a deep space and a flat surface. Like, I just think that's so cool.
That's so cool. So cool.
So the combination of like the representational objects with it, to me is like kind of funny. Like there's something humorous about it, and like kind of trying to like push together these two art languages, like this idea of kind of pure minimalism or like pure abstraction with representation, and all of those things, like for me in my life, just as a viewer or as an artist, like some of the struggle of doing representational work and feeling like a kind of personal investment in it, like how well can I paint this, or how well can I do this, or like who, what is the choice of the object or the person feels sometimes like so personal, and so maybe thinking, well, was there like trying to move away from that with like the pure abstraction, and maybe, in some ways like trying to bring that back in, like whether it's telling a story or revealing something personal to me.
I love how you like drop the forms into like landscape. It's like interrupting these angles, all of a sudden interrupt this natural landscape, and then vice versa. You put that little still life on.
Right, and that's like a little like fantasy, you know, this idea of like, you know, whether it's like something dropping down from outer space.
Yeah.
Like, what is this?
Yeah, that's where I'm going.
Yeah, like is this a portal into a
Yeah.
different dimension? Like all of those things.
That's how I
are
think
kinda
about them. Yeah,
interesting
yeah.
to me.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, let's see here. Mary. So Mary was a 2022 juried exhibition winner. So the juror was Janie Cohen. So yay, Mary. That was cool.
I know, I almost didn't, I was so late.
You what?
I was very late for the
Submitting?
opening.
Oh, were you?
No, for the opening.
Oh,
So
I remember.
you coming.
Here, yeah. Let's see here. So I love how you've incorporated a variety of mediums and materials, layering and building to create an exhibition theme and story about waves, the ocean and waves. So can you tell us all about your relationship with the ocean?
Yeah, so these two, I spent a lot of time in my gardens. I'm a gardener. I have probably 6 or 7 beds. They're an absolute mess right now, but I spent a lot of time out there. And I also spent a lot of time, although this fall was interrupted by some cough. I couldn't. But anyway, I surf, and so about 10 years ago I started surfing, and it really draws your attention to your relation when you're surfing. And I'm on a short stand-up paddleboard. Your relationship to the water it's an ongoing communication, and you are responding to everything that happens, every current, every wave. You know, there's no sitting around. It's a fully engaged process, surfing. And this woman came up to me. She was probably my age, with a lot of tattoos and skateboarding. She said, "So, do you do surf art?" I was like, "No, I don't do surf art." But then I started to think, I wonder how I could incorporate my feelings, this intense feelings I was having about this new experience on paper and in my work. And so that's how these wave drawings started coming, and I did a whole bunch of woodcuts about this sort of, it's like the only constant with the ocean is change. And boy, when you're in a situation where the waves are strong, the current's strong, the ocean is the ruler, you know, it's really in charge if you spend any time in the water. Anyway, so these drawings came out of that, and the boards came out of, my parents had a 10 by 10 foot water tank from Montgomery Ward in the 70s. They put it off their deck, and we had a plunge pool. We did cannonballs and all stuff. And then when they built the house in Etna, they took it out there. And then unfortunately my brother's father-in-law showed up and said his grandchildren were going to drown, so we had to cover it. And in the meantime, and then when we sold the house, when my mother passed on in 2016, we took the boards and brought them down to Warner. And their redwood boards are 60 years old, they're 50 years old, and they're soft, and the termites have gotten to them, or the ants, or whatever. I don't know if we have termites here. We have carpenter ants, right? And so I love the beautiful shape. You know, they were sort of like sentries rather than rideable boards. Although there is one in there that I've ridden. And then the other piece is Steve has a house, the Bahamas, and in North Andros, and I started being really attracted to this beautiful fishing line. It's turquoise, and then you see little pieces of orange plastic, and then you see I started mining it and bringing it home, and of course, part of it is a reflection of the sort of disgust you feel when you see all that garbage just tossed, like from cruise ships or A friend of mine said after Valentine's Day, he's seen actually a floating red island. And so in those pieces, I was kind of reflecting on that, these bits of beauty. I mean, I think the ocean is ultimately resilient, and we're just kind of passing through. And but anyway, I did find a balloon once attached to a pink ribbon, and it was just so poignant. I couldn't believe it. Like carrying it home practically like this.
I love how you chose to put the lights in there, and when they lit up, it just it's just so evocative. Underwater, with the sunlight coming in. I mean, I know it's, all this bad stuff too, but they're beautiful.
It's kind of beautiful.
Yeah.
Fragments.
Yeah.
I think of it as ocean fragments.
Yeah.
Our beaches are very clean in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay, let's see who's next.
My work is lived experience.
So, let's see. So, we're back to Cheryl. So you have a masterful sense of color. These pieces are beautiful to look at and draw in the viewer in the way you use color, light, layers, and texture. Your work is 2D, yet sculptural. Can you talk about your attachment to memories and secrets and layering and concealing them in wax?
Yeah. The layers I think of as memories, like you said. I think of memories, I think of experiences, and just changing perceptions, and all this stuff that we kind of carry with us, that we actually cover up what's actually happening right at the moment. And so these have some of that in it, and I like to scrape back or draw into those layers to kind of signify this, trying to get at what the truth is, and trying to uncover, what's really there.
Because we have no idea, right? I mean, so
Right.
I always think about
And
that.
it's
Like
not
a memory
important.
is what?
Yes, yeah, and
It's a myth.
we hang on to these memories that are really like these fictions because
Yeah,
we've changed them. And so I have like a real interest in that, on how we change our stories. And also the layering, well, with these, there's water in them too, which kind of points to what's reality. Is it the trees? Is it the reflections? The same with the negatives, with the positives, with the photographs. It's kind of questioning which side is it just what we're seeing? Is there something more underneath? And yeah.
This text in here, is this something meaningful for you, or is it I don't know what's happening there?
It's, I started doing that during the end of the last administration, because I
Oh,
felt
okay.
like I needed to get something out there. So I was taking like ancient sacred writings, and I would put them in my work, just kind of like these prayers that I wanted to get out there. These are actually from Buddhist sutras.
Okay.
So yeah, there is, but it's not important to read it. I kind of try to make it so you can't read it. It's just, but it's there, and it's, it's something that was written centuries and centuries ago. So
It's beautiful light, the dappling
Yeah.
light. I really respond to that.
And what about these vines?
well, the vines are kind of like in the last ones, the flowers in the pods. They're bringing the pieces up to the front. And with these, again, it's these I look at in two different ways. I look at them as kind of like our entanglements, where we can't see what's going on because we've got all this other messy stuff that we got blocking what our life is. And also I look at them as a way of, some people call it Indra's net, which is the interconnection of all life and how we influence and everything else is influenced by us. And I think of them also as like a vein structure that relates to the human body. So they have a lot of, in my work I do that, it kind of morphs from one thing to another thing while I'm working on it. But I don't think it's really important, it's just how the viewer reacts to it more than knowing, you know, what it is. But I like the fact that you want to get to the drawing, but you kind of can't because there's something blocking it. So.
Yeah, these were glowing yesterday. I took a picture. The sun was, yeah, it was like so spiritual, like in a church or something. The light was coming through, and these drawings, are they charcoal on Yupo? Is that?
It's graphite on Yupo, and then I have oil on it, which was really scary because I didn't know what it would do. So like the first time I had the first drawing done, I was like, well.
You didn't do a test? You didn't have like a little test?
I kind of tried to do a test, but I didn't have the same like type of Yupo, so I
was like a
wasn't
relief.
100% sure. But yeah, and when I was thinking of these, it's because when I saw I was going to have this room, I was thinking of, you know, past and present and the interconnection. So I wanted the building to be able to kind of show through. So, which I'm happy to see it does during the daylight, you know, and to kind of have them uniting. But like all my work, it's about past, present, impermanence, so yeah.
Okay, thank you. So Cheryl, where are we now? Here, I'm sorry, Rachel. So I know printmakers don't necessarily like to show their plates, which I don't really understand because I find them to be such gorgeous sculptural pieces. I love how you've incorporated the copper plates and that you use wood as a substrate. So they're such interesting materials that also signify and honor the printmaker in you. So if you could tell us a little bit about how you moved off the paper into the sculptural category.
So yeah, there is like this thing as a printmaker, people, especially if you're working on copper, which is so beautiful, people are like, oh, the plate, show the plate, but you know, you're like, that's not the work, that's the matrix to make the work, I wouldn't show that. But I was actually at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, and there was an exhibition talking about different substrates for painting, and they were talking about copper, and I was like, oh, that's a cool idea. I have a lot of copper, that's for sure. And especially with the etched copper, it suddenly there was like this opportunity to like kind of peek out like some of the etching. I mean, and you know, it makes sense, like etching was originally discovered as like a jewelry making enterprise, you know, when they were trying to make images on metal, and they learned about, you know, etching, you know, putting in the acid, and then suddenly it was like, oh, well, to show what the design looks like, you just take a little impression of it. So, yeah, so I liked that idea of like kind of the copper, the etching on the copper and the revealing of the copper being like this different layer, like creating this different kind of space that was very different than the illusion of the painting, like the kind of representational painting, the space that you create by just painting a picture. And that kind of back and forth with the materials, for me, sculptural materials, like as somebody who did woodblock printing and like cutting out, you know, often I would cut out shapes with a jigsaw and print that, and then like have this kind of cool shape, and then suddenly I was like, oh, I can put that into, you know, a relief piece or a wall piece. So there was that kind of back and forth as well.
Okay, I made a little video looking at your
Surround.
So, I mean, so you sort of talked about, so the next question is just how do you, like, alternate between painting and printmaking and sculpture?
Right.
Do you work, like, just back and forth in your studio?
Yeah, I mean, the sculpture is a little bit newer for me, and, you know, I've done a couple of big, you know, kind of much larger scale, and to do the larger scale pieces, I would make these maquettes, like, two of them.
Like these guys, I love these guys.
Which are really, you know, kind of fun to make, and I like the idea like this kind of the miniature that sort of stands for something bigger, like this translation of scale that you do. I'm still, I've kind of scaled a couple of these up large. I mean, not these in particular, but like something similar. One was at the Kent Museum last year.
Yeah, how did you make that piece anyway?
Yeah, I know. Good question. It was painted plywood, and it was like, trying to translate from the cardboard to the large scale. But I had, having done it before, I had somebody help me before who kind of really knew a lot about building, and it was kind of like quite heavy, like we had like, it was basically laminated 2 pieces of 3/4 inch plywood together. I mean, it was like very unwieldy, and it was something I really couldn't handle on my own, and I needed this friend of mine to help me. And this time I had these 2 assistants I hired to help me, and the 3 of us, it was just really fun. Like, it was like these 2 women helping me, and us like, with limited construction skills, but like figuring out how to do it.
Yeah, it looks awesome up there. Do you still have that piece?
I have it in pieces. I'm thinking of maybe putting it somewhere on my property. I mean, it's not like and the next step would be sort of researching some fabrication and talking to someone about like aluminum and,
right. What did you paint that piece with? What kind of paint did you use?
I used, let's see, the first piece I did like that, it was like an outdoor marine oil-based paint. And this one was, some of it was I think it was mostly latex this time, except the fluorescent was like an oil base.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't get up close to it, but from a distance, it looked like something fabricated, like that. It was like steel or something.
But it wasn't. But it was. I also like the idea of kind of doing it more like, I couldn't. I mean, I don't have at that point the facility to kind of make something super like Donald Judd slick. I mean, it was going to be like pretty like, a little more ramshackle bread and puppet, rather than, like it was, something very slick, Ellsworth Kelly or something. But,
well, good for you for tackling that, because that was a large piece. I don't know if you all saw that, but
it was a fun, a fun project.
Yeah, you had all kinds of pieces throughout the Kent that were sculptural. Right. You had a lot of wood, from what I remember. That was last year.
Right.
So, yeah.
Can I ask you what sculptors you might be looking at? Is it Anthony Caro I'm ringing a bell with me?
Anthony Caro.
Yeah. The sort of shifted planes and whatnot?
Oh, cool. No, I
sort of, not quite.
Well, I'm not sure if I've seen
thinking
that. Sounds like, I want to check it out. Let's see.
I don't know.
If I could remember names. I mean, I love Carol Bove, the color, I don't know, she does these steel things. And I don't know. I mean, I think more color in the work. I mean, I love, super, very pure abstraction and minimalism. I do like that, but
do you sketch these out? How are you getting these little things?
I do.
Yeah,
I do.
They're pretty complicated. Angles.
I do the sketches and then I make them kind of in paper, so that I can cut them quickly and.
Yeah, I always think of Kiki Smith when I was like,
right. Well,
she was doing that for her father, and she was
I love Kiki Smith, and actually that was a really. Meaningful lecture when I was young. I remember her talking about being a young woman sculptor and kind of not being taken seriously, and then being like, I'm going to make this in the most sort of ephemeral material, because the whole you should make it in steel or concrete or and she was just like, no, I'm going to just kind of have string and put it together with spit and just to
But she used to make those little forms for her father, David, right? David Smith. Yeah, she would. Her and her sisters would make those as a table. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's really an artist. She uses it.
Yeah, she's
Right,
really great.
brilliant,
right.
yeah.
I always look to her. She's so great. So let's see. Oh, so Mary, I wanted to ask you about. So I have noticed in your collection of work there something besides the ocean, which was something about tangles. I noticed something about tangles going on. I was just wondering if you could maybe talk about that accumulation of marks and.
Well, mark making is, one of the central interests on 2 dimensions for me. I like to draw. I love the marks of a printmaker are wonderful. All the unexpected things that happen. But I just want to backtrack a little bit. Those you mentioned Ellsworth Kelly. I saw a show of his work at the Museum of Fine Arts about 10 years ago, and I was just blown away. His sculptures, beautiful wood, so pristine, so and he's just sat there. And so when I was making those wave riders, I kept thinking about him and just that pure shape. But anyway, that's aside from that. So, I think these are all kind of woven wanderings. I don't know how to describe it any better. These things just happen, and I put them together, and there's dozens more, but.
And I like the photographs too. I really, like I said, I enjoyed all the pieces that you wove together to create the story. So the photo, you can't see them well, but you can take a walk in there. So those are, are those from the hurricane?
Those are from a hurricane, and they sort of are a metaphor for the resilience of nature, because by the next year or two, especially in the tropics, everything just returns. And after a hurricane, the devastation is absolutely astonishing. Things are just leveled. And then Earth comes back. I really hold that the Earth will overcome what we throw at it, and you can see it.
Yeah, I think they really, there's like this thing going on between the photographs and these pieces for me.
When I started going surfing, it was very impulsive. I went over there and I saw that people sitting on the prone boards weren't catching the waves. It was this 2 guys on the stand-up. And so I said, I'm going to do that. And because you can catch more waves if they're smaller too. But it was just a pivotal moment in my life, I suppose. I used to tell people there was life before and then a life after. I've done a lot of those drawings with the ink on paper of the marks. I think I started about 10 years ago.
Yeah, those are beautiful. Well, folks, that's really all I have. So my final question, just what's next? Do you have any burning ideas that you're wanting to work on, upcoming shows or residencies? Do you have any thoughts about? I know it's always, what's next? What am I going to do now? I'm working for a year on this.
Well, the pieces that I have actually in that little video that aren't in the show, I'm still working on those. So I felt that they were complete in a way, but because the rhythm wasn't right for them in this show, I just thought it was an opportunity to continue with them. So I always feel inspired by it.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
And I don't feel with this work that sometimes you have a show and you're like, I got to bring that home. But I feel very. Have you ever done that? Wow, can I get that out of here?
Yeah.
But I don't feel that.
Cut it up.
But I don't feel that at a show. I feel very settled with it. So I'm very delighted for the opportunity.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. It's wonderful. So now's the time, folks. Questions? Any questions? So there's always that weird. Everyone's looking.
Rachel, with your work, I have Cezanne later on doing the same thing. Were those some of the things you were inspired by or thinking of when you were doing that, or is it something else?
Well, a little bit, yeah. I mean, do you mean like when the perspective's off? A little?
Yeah, and it sort of gets you sort of like
Yeah. I mean, I've taught foundations drawing and foundations design and like trying to teach perspective, which I always feel is so cool. Like I love, just like the idea of like trying to teach someone. I mean, having students who look at a table and they draw it and they draw a rectangle, if there's an apple on the table and a circle above it, and it's just like, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
And that like how like having to be trained or taught like how to draw something like you see it is so fascinating to me. Or like I have been, I had the opportunity to go to Italy and like seeing like whole guys like deaf, where you have to stand over here to see the skull. But like when you stand up close, it's like this strange object. Like all of those things definitely interest me for sure.
You see it in the work.
Yeah, and I'm not like sitting there with like the vanishing points and like tracing. but I'm interested in those vanishing points. Yeah.
Please.
I think it's really interesting that all three of you, I think maybe it's like you really weave through the pictorial space versus object space. And I think I myself go back and forth too.
Yeah.
I wonder for the viewers, like seeing a picture is an illusional space. And then to interact with an object, it's an actual object in real space. I was told that if you work with the 2D, the idea is that it's illusional. So even though it's 2D, they imagine it to be in 3D space. And that's what you bring the viewer into. So when you create a three-dimensional object and present it to a viewer, it's like time element, like it being, it's in here. So I'm really curious because all three of you guys do that with the work that you do. Is that Michelle's piece? How do you think about it? I mean, of course, as a maker, you're like but like understanding that you're putting viewers into this kind of like as you make the piece and put it out there, like your expectation for what you want viewers to get out of your work. It's that, like I'm always thinking Fontana's piece because I just like movies.
What did you say?
Fontana, we see Fontana's with like here's you can see it as an abstract painting, and then but look, this is an object, canvas, and I can see that happening all through his work. So just I'm curious with as you make the piece and you're creating. Yeah, we're asking the viewers to be. I don't know, like it's always a challenge for me as an artist, is like, people want you to, unless, art crowd, it's like, what is your work about? Like, how do you explain what you're, what is the viewing space and perspective or stance you want me to take? And I don't know, I'm just curious how you guys think about it as you make drawing paintings or like this in-between things, a hybrid object, like,
Yeah, I
is
think
it
about
having educated our viewers to understand,
Right. I mean, I think about that a lot, like that, especially when I was making prints, and I'm curious, Mary, if you feel this too, like when I was making, with etchings, where I would have, whatever drawing, images in the plate that would be printed on a paper with a border, and I was very aware of this being like a space you go into, and it got me interested in doing wood blocks where I would cut out shapes, print it on big paper, and then that was the thing, as opposed to like the paper containing this place to go into. And I feel like I keep trying to kind of go back and forth with that, and I am really aware of the idea of like, yeah, there's this kind of like ocean scene you go into, but then there's this like flat, you know, print that's been glued on, and so like I'm very fascinated by that, like flat, deep, you know, like how do you go back and forth in that space, and then with the sculpture, like using shapes that are already sort of coded to be perspective shapes of like a rectangle in perspective, but then it's actual in the actual piece itself.
Yeah. I guess like springboard, you know, like each piece, like the springboard you provide.
Yeah.
Well, I know for me, my undergraduate and graduate degrees were in sculpture. I only started printmaking in 2001, and for a certain period, the only sculpture I did really were like outdoor exhibitions. I mean, installations, you know, and they were like little narratives, little stories. These are the stories I'm going to tell you, and I want you to think about what I'm trying to communicate. I mean, one, for example, I had a brick patio, and I had a rocking chair that I painted blue, and I had a enormous an antenna I took off the roof of my house. And I just left it at that, and I can't remember the title of it. And it didn't even really matter to me, because there was enough of familiarity with the objects. And I've always had that going. This, if I'm changing the scale, or I'm, you know, there's just always a connection to something, some little story, whether it's clear to you or not. You know, I'm always giving that, and I think it's when you're doing sculpture, you know, people, I think it's almost easier for them because it's sitting right there, and they can, you know, people say, oh, look how tall that is, look at the material, look at the surface, look at the, you know, it's easier for people to ask questions about it, I think, than some two-dimensional work, unless it's really screaming, oh, this is a beautiful mountain, this is pastoral, whatever. So, you know, but I have to say with the woodcuts, my woodcuts, the physical woodcuts are beautiful. You know, so you get both. You can kind of, sometimes I think, wow, I'm going to show the woodcut, and then I'm going to show the print.
Yeah.
It's all very physical, sculptural.
We did that for Lily Mayer. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
when she had her show a few years ago, and
Yeah.
I talked her into showing the wood blocks because they're so beautiful.
They're so beautiful.
I'm not a printmaker, so when I saw those, I was like, oh my God, these are gorgeous.
It's like fine.
Especially patina over patina over patina
Yeah.
over patina.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for mine, I just really enjoy throwing people off. You know, where's it coming from? And is it surface? Is it top? Is it? Yeah.
I mean, I think you're like the scale that you provide, or the perspective or viewing point, where you start, right?
Yeah.
You see yourself in a small figure in a vast space versus actual who you are. So yeah, it's great to hear you guys talk about, you know, people to be all.
Yeah.
I see that.
Anybody else? Well, thank you. Thank you all.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.